Welcome to Ascend Leadership Monthly, where we explore real world skills and everyday experiences that shape how we lead. And today we're talking about balance. And maybe I should have started there, right? As opposed to getting excited to what people were saying, because someone said, Jasmine, you said, more life, less work. And I'll give you a hint, it isn't an either or, because life is work, work is life, but not in the way we think. And then the other person, the comment you called out was strategies I'm not aware of. Folks, please, let's learn from each other. Everything I'm sharing today is all the stuff I've learned, School of Hard Knocks, and some study, of course. Share yours in the Q&A, and I'll share them out with everybody else. So back to this whole thing about work-life balance, and I'm putting that in air quotes because balance is complicated, right? As is everything else with leadership, it's complicated. And in this series, we've talked about, what communication, empowerment, mindfulness, leading change, building trust. And we've done this all through the lens of intention and impact. Intentions are the efforts that we put out. Outcomes are the impacts of what we do. And as leaders, we're always watching, measuring, considering, implementing, right? And we feel like we're doing all of the things all the time. And by that, it just doesn't mean your workday. There's that. But sometimes if we're not careful, we start taking up much more than that workday, so to speak. It creeps into our personal lives. And that's the rub, right? Because what does that even mean? Personal life. What, the very phrasing of that sometimes makes it sound like it's an either or. So that's what we're exploring today. Our thoughts, our energy, our sense of presence. It doesn't have two sides. The whole work side and then the not at work side. It's as if they're part of the same whole, if you will. But that framing, two parts, I don't know about you, but I see life as more complicated than that. So this morning, as I was kind of doing my run through, I thought about a kaleidoscope. Also, hang in there with me, right? Kaleidoscopes, they are beautiful, but they're also complicated. And they move, they shift, respond to the light. That's how we are as people. We talk about work life, we talk about personal life, separate lenses, but they're not. It's just life, right? We bring all of ourselves to everywhere that we go. That person who's leading the meeting is the same person that's going home to family or going out to that get together with their friends. The only question for us when we think about balancing work and balancing life is how all of those pieces connect. And as leaders, we set the tone. We're showing everyone around us what success looks like here in our organization. And it's not what we say, it's how we live it, because everybody's watching, right? We used to say, my husband and I, about the kids, when they were little, we used to say whenever we were doing things, particularly in moments of tension, tape recorders are on, right? And by that, we meant the kids are watching. Well, your employees are watching, your colleagues are watching. And thanks to social media, people are seeing more than ever before. So they're seeing what the full life of a leader looks like. So I'm looking to see. Oh, no, I'm not sharing that. I just wanted to see if people had some ideas. Please share them as I go along. And Jasmine's going to nudge me in case something really good comes in, then I don't see it. Who am I? I'm Janai Tien. I had a 26 plus year as a practicing accountant in public accounting. And today I'm a public speaker. I'm a speaker and I'm a trainer and a consultant. And my work is centered on something that I call fearless inclusion, which I define as the freedom to be yourself and the ability to create space for others to do the same. That is all about boundaries and balance, folks. I develop trainings and workshops focused on that inner work of leadership, authenticity, intentionality, culture building, balance, communication, right? My passion is to help business professionals build deep connections, cultivate safety, and thrive as inclusive, mindful, and trusted leaders. Now, this series is built on a framework that I created. It's the Ascend leadership model. And I wanted us to reframe how we think about leadership. Ascend isn't just a framework, it's a mindset. It's how we show up. And it's the foundation of everything I teach and hopefully how I live as a leader. As I was alluding to earlier, leadership is a full body experience. It isn't just intellectual. It's not just deploying the right combinations of skills and techniques. I know what's the best framework or I know what is the right system, right? That's technical stuff. And to that, I say to all of us as leaders in business, I would hope so, right? Like it kind of goes without saying that we have those skills. That's what got us here. But if you think about what it means to be a leader, and if you've been in many of my webinars, you know that Peter Drucker quote, the only when a leader is only someone who's defined as followers. Okay, I did not get that right. But basically, you're only a leader if people are following you, right? It's how they experience us. And so that's what I mean when I talk about the Ascend model. In the context of balance, it reminds us that leadership isn't something we turn on and off. It's something we carry through every conversation. And because balance isn't about separating our life from our work, it's about aligning them. And each pillar holds a piece of that alignment. So the first one is authenticity. So authenticity is about being the same person in every room. And it's about being genuine. It's not about playing roles. You know yourself, you know your values, you're paying attention to your emotion and what drives you. And that sense of authenticity keeps us aligned in all of those rooms as we move through them. Yes, we shift, we adapt in different environments. That's natural. The trick here is that you don't want to be wearing a mask, right? You bring what you need to bring into the room and what's appropriate for the situation. Work-life balance begins with that authenticity. We have to know who we are and be rooted in that truth. When we live and lead authentically, we can make choices that honor and value the space we're in, whether we're at work, whether we're at home, whether we're at our social event, whether we're at a community event. We are showing up authentically and we're not worried about the other space when we're in this space. Right? We're not trying to meet every demand. We are trying to model integrity by living consistently, whether we're at home or at work or anywhere in between. This alignment can help us create priorities, know clarity about priorities, and boundaries, which we're going to talk about, because what are boundaries, right? And all of this can help us prevent burnout. The next one is self-leadership. Now, self-leadership is managing yourself before leading anyone else. Your mindset, your emotions, your focus, your energy. It's the ability to notice what's happening within you and then responding with intention and not being reactive. Now, when it comes to balance, self-leadership, that's what keeps us steady, in constant motion, right? It's easy to think of balance as something we find. That's the way we position it sometimes, but it's really something we create: discipline, awareness, etc. And this balance requires a really strong sense of self-leadership, how we manage our time and how we manage our energy, right? So self-leadership isn't just discipline, it's self-respect and accountability for our capacity, because understanding our capacity is a good part of understanding what am I bringing to the different spaces to ensure I have the right energy for all of those spaces. And then I'm not carrying energy from one place into another, right? Because that happens. And this isn't a weakness, having to manage this. This is wisdom. Next one, connection. This is how we relate to others, to our teams, to the environments that we're leading. It's the foundation of trust. And it's built not just through communication, but that genuine care and consistency. Now, for leaders, connection reminds us that we are not meant to do it all and to do it alone. So balance doesn't come from managing everything ourselves. It comes from building relationships that nurture. And when we lead with that type of connection, we create space for collaboration, and it creates space for us when we have that deeper connection, that trust. It helps us avoid things like being overextended or exhausted or frustrated. Now, the next one is empowerment. Empowerment is the other side of what I was just talking about connection. It's helping others step into their own capability. This is part of that trust. These are the tools that we need to have as leaders, because when we empower others, we can let go. And when we try to carry everything ourselves, that's how we burn out and run out of capacity. Not because we aren't capable, but because leadership isn't a solo act. Earlier, I like to practice doing my webinars, and I practice my dog, his name is Doug. And I was presenting to Doug earlier, and he understood what I meant when it's not a practice. What I was doing was moving my hands around, and it got me thinking about an orchestra, right? So empowering, think of yourself as the conductor. A really strong leader, you don't need to do it all. I would argue maybe you don't need to do any of it. The conductor is leading the orchestra. You find the best musicians in all of the different categories. We practice, we train, we make sure we're aligned on goal, vision, and intention, and then you lead it, right? And that's how you let others bring their full selves, feel like they can have agency in what they're doing. And it creates space for you to think, space for you to rest, and space for you to focus on what you need to give your attention to as the leader. Navigation. This is how we move, adapt, course correct, and respond to the things that are shifting around us. When it comes to balance, navigation is what helps us adjust without losing direction. No plan, no schedule, no routine ever goes exactly as designed. That's okay. Balance isn't about perfect control. It's responsiveness without drain. So rather than fighting change, it's reading the moment and responding with clarity and purpose. And sometimes those moments they blur, right? Like life comes into work and work comes into life. No, let me phrase it this way. Personal things come into our life at work and vice versa. So that's what I mean, navigating between all of those pivots and movements. And then the last one is decisive action. And the thing about decisive action, what is it? This is moving with purpose, taking clear and deliberate steps that align with your values and your vision. It's the point where clarity turns into motion, right? Intentions lead to those outcomes. Now, when it comes to balance, decisive action tells us that all of this stuff doesn't happen by accident. We don't stumble into balance, right? And decisive action, when it comes to balance, these are all those little decisions that we make in all of those little moments. How we prioritize, how we respond, when do we pause? Think every yes and every no that comes out of our mouth shapes how we spend our time, where we put our energy, and what signals we send to others about what matters. Now, internal narratives, they're powerful, right? These are the stories we tell ourselves that keep us chasing balance. Maybe we never find it. And I'm curious, I'll ask you, which of these have you said out loud, or have you believed in at some point, or maybe still perceive as what balance means? I'd be curious if you drop those in the chat. So I'll try to move my screen around so I can see the chat. But so these are some of the things that I thought of, that these are all the messages, and they made sense at one time or another. There's a reason these sayings came up, but this is not our reality today in the modern workplace. As I said before, in the middle of our work life, something personal pops up. In the middle of our personal life, something work-related pops up. So balance isn't about winning. It's about navigating, as I've said. Time management issues. This is a common one. Suggests that time management is a tool that we can use to reach a solution. But here's the thing. You cannot schedule your way out of imbalance if your priorities aren't aligned. Balance is something you earned. Once things slow down, you can take a break. Lord knows I have said that one myself. The reward narrative, right? That rest is something you deserve after you've done enough work. But what do we know about rest today? It's what allows us to keep doing meaningful work. Policy issue. We just need more flexible policies. What's that saying? I just thought of it. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, right? That to me is kind of what this is. A flexible policy cannot override rigidity of mindset because you can't write balance into the handbook. Yes, you can write policies about work schedules, expectations, um, availability, holiday, vacation, paid time off. You can write all of that into your policy because you are trying to create, I would say, maybe a structural framework that allows for flexibility. We say flexibility, but we don't necessarily express what that means. Now, as a leader, we have to be particularly important to this one when it comes to a policy issue because the balance ultimately lives in the behaviors that we exhibit as leaders. Most of what's going to drive these kinds of behaviors in the workplace are unwritten rules. Those are the unspoken norms. They reinforce policy. The don't check your email on the weekends, wink, wink, but you as a leader are checking your email on the weekends. So other people are doing it too. Not because they feel they need to, but because they feel they can't not. I hope I said that right? So, what messages are we sending when we live outside of those policies, or we don't even have those policies, right? So, that's something to think about. Yeah, somebody was talking about once things slow down and they never slow down. I'm sorry, Jasmine, what were you going to say?
No, yeah, that's all I was going to say is it looks like of the people who have submitted something, that once things slow down seems to be the most popular answer for sure.
Yeah.
And then there's some other comments that I put over in priority for you.
Look, thank you. What's interesting is, I said I was a practicing accountant for 26 years. 17 of those years I had my own firm. I understand this so deeply, right? Somebody said something interesting, and I want to share it now so that we can keep this in mind. Thank you for sharing this, Stanley. Stanley said, balance is decreasing anything that is excessive and increasing anything that is deficient. That's an interesting way of framing it. What that requires us to do, though, was one, challenge these narratives, and two, most importantly, develop self-awareness. And I mean real-time awareness about what's affecting us in this moment, what narratives are creeping in at this moment. So thank you for bringing that up. So coming back to this list, though, so compartmentalization. Why is this one a problem? This is the old school thinking of leave your life at the door, right? We don't have emotions at work. We have emotions, and we can't be afraid to use them, and we can't judge others for using them. But we still have to have emotional intelligence. It's not being emotional in the sense of being sort of reactive in the traditional sense that we see it. So we don't stop being human when we walk through the door, but we do need to think about it in terms of acknowledging those experiences and how they're affecting us. When we compartmentalize, our teams might see or perceive disconnection. And that has the opposite effect of us showing ourselves as being present and engaged. And that's an important leadership practice. Now, martyrdom. My husband will tell you that I might have suffered from this one, right? But nobody gets to the top by leaving early. Well, this is a story that is rooted in the scarcity mindset. This is a performance culture. The myth that exhaustion shows you're dedicated, right? This is that thumping on the chest. I survived another busy season. And yes, busy season, it's part of the industry. And I actually want to talk about that in a moment when we talk about energy. But what we want to be careful of is that overwork gets celebrated. And so people only see the work and not the sacrifice and not the cost. That doesn't mean I need to be an open book and share my entire private life. But it does mean I have to show that I have a life, that there's balance. And it's not in what I say, it's how I show up, right? And then the last one down here is having it all, right? I did this in another webinar. I was thinking that Angelique commercial where we talk about bring home in the bacon and all right, I'm not even going to try it because I don't remember all the words. But this is a myth that this is about fitting it all in. And if we can fit it all in, we can do it all. Somehow it's balanced. But first of all, what do we mean by all? What do we mean by that? And this isn't a question of volume. Now, why does this not work? The fundamental myth, the fundamental challenge in some of these long-standing narratives is that this is about separation. Work is over here, personal life is over there. It's like an on-off switch. Like I leave this room, this is my work room, I turn off the light, and when I go into that room, it's personal, and I turn on the light. But it doesn't work that way, right? So what we want to do here is reframe balance as not being perfect in every domain at the same time. It ebbs and it flows. Some things demand more of us, and sometimes other things it shifts. It's not symmetry. Now, there's also something to think about in terms of our physiology. So there's good stress, and it creates adrenaline, ambition, it changes our hormones. There's also hurtful stress, and it activates those exact same things. Hormones, energy cycles, emotional load, they all affect how we feel. And how we feel is how we determine whether we have that sense of balance. So, this is really understanding how all of this impacts those internal feelings and sensations that we're experiencing. Now, the key idea here is that work and life are not opposing forces. They're an interconnected domain, as I said, as a whole. And so this isn't about allocating our time, but it's about alignment. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that when I talk about presence, because you can't be in two places at the same time, though many of us try. How many people have been sitting in a meeting and can you see my phone? And like they're looking at their phone and then trying to be in the meeting. And what you know is you're never in either. And so this might make you feel like you're stretching and start to create stress or anxiety about something you're not doing. You'll get to it. But maybe if you pay attention now, you will make sure that what you're doing now, you optimize and you boost your own performance. So this idea that it's an either or is where we get the challenge. The question for me and something to think about is, when was the last time you were physically present, but mentally somewhere else? When was the last time you were doing something work related and constantly feeling this draw, desire, or pressure to be doing something not work related, and one was affecting the other? That's where we start to see that lack of boundary that's creating the blurred lines that gives us a feeling of being out of balance. Somebody said, always, I don't want that to be your answer. So hopefully, and somebody else said yesterday, this is actually good to think about, because when we can recognize we're doing it, that's what I said earlier in response to the comment. This is noticing in real time how we're reacting to what's around us. When we can pay attention to those opposing forces, we have an opportunity to pause, reset, and reconnect. That is what all of this is about, because balance isn't that seesaw where something is one way or the other. I was trying to think of it. It's not a seesaw. What is it? Well, I said it was a kaleidoscope, but now I'm getting carried away with what I'm thinking it is. Talking about energy. When that balance starts to break down, so does our energy. Remember, I was talking about how does it feel? Well, this is going to be different when you think about how you spend your time and how it shows up in your, I don't want to say energy allocation, because we have limited energy. Actually, that's not true. What we have is limited time, right? How many of you have heard this now more and more often? Time is our most precious currency. It is fixed. You can't add more hours, but what you can change is the quality of what happens within those hours. Energy is renewable, and it's how we create value in our time. So, somebody just said, where is it? Welcome to ADHD. Some people can't turn that off. That isn't actually a very good point because neurodiversity influences all of this. Thank you. And Carrie, if you will remind me to bring that back up when I show you my calendar, because it is actually related to some of this. Now, so if you look at my energy wheel, that's what I call this, you can start to see how some of our energy is constantly shifting and moving. So for example, in busy season, you will rebalance. It's not a question of right or wrong. This isn't a question of equal distribution. I was thinking about, this is another thing I thought about this morning. You know, in Cirque du Soleil, they have, well, they're amazing at balance, but for different reasons. And there's this thing, and I don't know what it's called, but it's two wheels and they spin. And then there are these people running inside of the rings and they're running outside of the rings. And sometimes it's spinning really fast. Sometimes it's spinning really slowly. Sometimes it stops. And they're constantly changing from running inside of this spinning circle to running outside of it. This is what I mean by it being dynamic and by it being a balance. It's almost like a tightrope. And so it sounds exhausting to try to manage all of this energy. But when you think about it in terms of what are you feeling and does it feel different in all of these spaces, and which of these do you need to renew, to feel restored, to feel whole, that can help you to start paying attention to it dynamically and adjusting or recognizing I'm not going to have a lot of that now, and that's okay. Energy also fluctuates. Emotional, cognitive, physical, social, mental, spiritual. So this is about recharging all of those batteries. Think about F1. Does anybody follow F1? These cars are driven a lot on electrical power. And when they are pushing hard, they're draining that power. They have to pause, slow down to recharge those batteries. I remember I wrote an article, something like, you have to slow down to speed up. That's what we're talking about here. Now, I'm going to give you some examples of what I mean. Now, so what I've done is I've taken 5 dots and I put equal dots in every one of these domains. Each of these dots represents an energy unit. Now, what is your default state? There isn't only one state, so that was a bit of a tricky question. For example, in busy season, I knew that there was going to be less time for social because there's more time that's put into work. My sense of balance in busy season was different than equal distribution of all of them. Or in my practice, I closed for the week after tax season. I closed for the week of Thanksgiving, and I closed the office the last 2 weeks of the year around the holidays. It wasn't people having to take vacation. We were just closed. There was no work, no dots in the work domain. So really understanding what is your normal, depending on your situation, the period, the phase that you're going through, so that you can notice when you're shifting. What do I mean by that then? What does it look like for you to be under stress, to be feeling stretched? Because your busy season normal, there's still going to be a busy season sliding into feeling stressed more than your normal, right? And when that happens, energy gets drawn away from the different domains and you start to very quickly and rapidly fall out of balance. And then the last one is exhaustion and burnout. Look, first of all, you don't have as many dots, and some of these dots are starting to fade. You are losing energy. And when you lose energy, it's going to be very difficult to maintain momentum, feel good about work, feel present at work, feel accomplished at work without feeling like you're sacrificing your personal life. That's where we get some of that balance and that tension, right? So that's where we want to be paying attention, because if balance means I have to do one thing at work and one thing at home, and therefore I've balanced myself, I'm setting myself up for failure, and I'm setting myself for feelings of disappointment and some of the negative narrative because I haven't done this thing and I've only done that thing. when it's rarely going to ever be 50-50. Sometimes it's 90-10, and sometimes it is 50-50. Honoring and respecting that and stripping away those narratives is what's going to help us feel a sense of balance. When you look at it this way, many of us might already be, when you reflect on it a little bit more and you think about your energy loads, you think about how that feels, you think about how you are staying connected with those you love and your colleagues, and you're able to continually move forward in your professional goals and your career goals. And when I look at that way, maybe I do have more of a sense of balance when I shed this idea that I have to split my time between two identities. Now, speaking of time, and I touched on this quite a bit, presence. You have to be fully invested in the thing that you're invested in. Because if you are only invested in this while being anxious about that, then you're never going to feel good about either, if that makes sense, right? This saying, be present, be absent, but not both, is something that I first heard many years ago. It was actually in a leadership program that I was attending, and it was shared in the beginning of the first day. This was a year-long program, and it was said in the form of a shared agreement. Now, what did this mean? It means that, sure, we're busy, we're leaders, and sometimes you're going to have to step out. Sometimes something will pop up. A friend, why am I thinking about the hard things? A friend I was going to say somebody gets into a car accident, not I want to think about, but it's instantaneously pulls you out of work. Somebody calls you and says, they just got that promotion, they got that raise. Your friend just called you because they actually used a phone, and for a brief moment, you popped out of work mode and pulled into excitement, shared relationship, personal mode, right? Sometimes these kinds of so-called distractions happen. The trick is to be in whatever moment you're in. If you try to pretend that you're here when your heart and mind are over there, as a leader, I promise you people are watching you. And what that tells me, if I'm watching you do that, is it's okay if I keep my phone down here and I'm trying to keep my eye on maybe two different things. Now, having said that, I remember I was in a different leadership program. It was a different, it required me to travel. And I was actually in New York City. I very distinctly remember this one. I was in New York City sitting in a conference room, and there were only 8 of us in this training program. And this was a training program that also, I think we did quarterly meetings in that one. And I had something happening in the background. It was personal. It was a touch and go situation. And if something shifted the way we knew it might, I was going to have to get up and leave and go home. But I didn't want to not attend because nothing might happen on the personal side. What did I do? I recognized this rule or this practice of being present or absent or not both, no, present or the other, not both, is I shared with them, I have something going on in the background. They didn't need to know what, but they did need to know that this was happening because I might be distracted. Occasionally, I'm going to check in. And my normal 100%, if I were to measure on that, I'm really only bringing 60% today. But giving you all of my 60% today means I'm giving it 100%. But I was being open and I was being transparent. Now, what are some traps here in terms of setting some of those boundaries? Some of these might sound familiar, right? Boundaries are just as much about saying yes and being present as they are about knowing when to not be present, if that makes sense, right? This is what protects you being present in this space and then protects you being present over here. So what are some of these traps? Well, the overextension trap. This is over availability. This is you have a fear maybe of missing something, or you don't want to be perceived as being disengaged. So good intentions, I'm going to stay on top of things, but that can quickly shift into expectation, right? And as a result, you can start to blur your work hours. You can start to build up fatigue. And there might become a dependency, if you will, on immediacy in order to own something. So, what's the boundary skill here? This is establishing maybe digital availability, emotional availability windows where you model that responsiveness with healthy limits. The hero trap is I need to jump in, I need to fix it, I need to control the outcomes. Now, this might be well intentioned in terms of responsibility, but what it actually does is potentially limits the growth of others. And it reinforces the idea that you're the only one who can do this. A boundary skill here, particularly as leaders, is allowing other people to feel friction, to experience discomfort, and to struggle through. Failure is a strong word, but personally, you don't learn anything from getting it right. You learn by making safe mistakes, reflecting on those mistakes, and then when we know better, we do better. But that requires me as a leader to set a boundary that allows you to feel that discomfort, right? Identity traps. The trap here, for example, is that you're blurring the lines between professional identity and your personal identity as if you have two identities. This goes back to what I said very early in the beginning, which is we bring all of ourselves to everywhere. And so we want to be careful that we don't overvalue one aspect of our life over the other, where my personal identity is something that is more meaningful to me than work. That can make work feel less fulfilling. And vice versa. Our professional identity can't consume our personal identity. And then my sense of worth is tied to what I did at work. And that can be a bit performative, it can be quantitative, and that can be dangerous. Immediately creating those two zones that I'm pinging between. What's another one? Over flexibility, right? Over flexibility is a dangerous trap because this is like, I'm going to be flexible till it hurts, right? Being adaptable to everyone else's need without holding the line for my own. That's going to strip away. That is an utter lack of boundary. It might seem helpful, but it's at your own expense. So, what we want to talk about doing here is healthy flexibility. It shows a sense of self respect. We define our negotiables, or non negotiables, right? We define our non negotiables, and that's a boundary practice. And systemic traps, I think I talked about the flexibility policy thing. But this is also about communicating those boundaries that I was just talking about setting, right? Being explicit. But we have to do this proactively. We have to name those limits so others can respect them. I'm demonstrating self respect by naming them and by giving everybody notice, if you will, of those boundaries. It allows them to plan around them and not put them into a situation where they need to be reactive because they didn't feel prepared. So there are a lot of different ways that we can start to create some of those boundaries so that we're not pinging back and forth. Now, I just want to touch on this briefly because those boundaries are easier to hold when they're rooted in our values, right? When we know what matters, kind of makes it easier to say yes and no if we can get over some of those boundary narratives that I had on the last slide. When we can align our time with our energy, we can focus on those things that truly matter, right? So that when our values are driving our decision making, trade-offs don't feel like a sacrifice of one or the other, but they feel like sort of intentional movement. And so when we tie what we're doing to deeper, I was going to say deeper meaning, but back to, I don't want to keep using the word values, but it works, right? What's underneath is powering what felt like a no, where the no felt bad. We don't want to feel bad. Now, you don't want to just say no. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it. But the point here is being able to say it, letting those values be your compass. So, what do we do here? How do we build this capacity? Well, I created 4 categories. There's micro, macro recovery from moments. There's also understanding flexibility, and there's also modeling. Because I want you to think about restoration as capacity building. So, excuse me. So the first one, micro recovery. This is building in little moments of rest. These are pauses throughout the day. If you can pause, take a breath, refocus, then it'll feel like you're more invested in your work. You're more present in this moment. You're not drawn to doing the other things. When you really do this thing well, then you go and do that thing well, and then you leave and do that thing at home well. You feel balanced. You feel a sense of accomplishment, right? And so, micro recovery isn't about taking breaks from work. This is about managing your energy before it drops. So, a couple of things here. This might literally be before you jump on the next Zoom, only takes you 15 seconds to just take a stretch, right? Stretching is amazing what it does in your body. Take 10 slow, deep breaths. I don't know the term for it, but there's a physiological benefit in our bodies by doing that that can help us settle down. Energy or emotion from one into the next will carry. And that energy doesn't get dispersed. It can disrupt the next thing and take you out of being present. Macro recovery. What I mean by this is longer rest times. It's maybe having a full day with no meetings. It might be creating work sprints or focus time where you don't have your device around, right? It might be having a every other Friday, I don't check email or something like that. Could even be a sabbatical. Flexing to demands. This is where you as a leader show and build trust and psychological safety by calling out the we need to flex in this moment, right? This week is going to be a heavier week because da 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 is going on. So I'm going to need to step away for Friday to make sure I can stay focused. You're creating transparency and you're showing that flex and honoring the shift. It could be, my son is graduating this weekend, so I'm going to be a little distracted this week. I might need to pop out a couple times. This is being present or absent, but not both, with transparency, right? So this isn't about apologizing. It's shifting priorities and acknowledging that. And then modeling behavior is exactly what it says, right? How you do is how they're going to do. When you can acknowledge your limits, normalize those shifts for the team. I'm going to log off early today because this is amazing weather, but I'm going to pop in later tonight just to make sure gets done after the kids go to bed, right? Now be careful, because what we don't want to do is send one of those unwritten expectations that you're going to work at night. So this requires us to think more holistically about culture, but thinking about ways we can model this balancing our energy so we're committed to the things that we say we want to be doing. That's what we're talking about as leaders. What are some strategies then? So I just pulled a couple up. I don't know, Jasmine, if anybody included anything in the chat. I haven't been watching the Q&A, but
there was a couple things.
I see one here. Somebody said, when you feel burnout, you can watch a comedy movie, walk in the park, visit a zoo. Now, those are going to take a longer break, but I love that. Let's see, what else is in here? Priority versus dream list. I'm not sure what that means. All right. Well, folks, listen, if you have other ideas besides these, please share them and I'll try to find them in the chat. What are some things
I moved over, but maybe I shouldn't have done that.
No worries. No worries. I'll scan this back at the end of the Q&A. Okay. So what do I mean by these? Protect your calendar, holistic scheduling, intentionally putting buffers, schedule a 50-minute meeting. I use Google Workspace and I have it set up where it always truncates the time. So if I schedule a meeting for an hour, Google puts it on my calendar at 50 minutes. If I schedule it for a half an hour, it shows up as 25 minutes, and you get the idea. It actually creates a buffer zone. Now, I'm going to show you my calendar, but I don't want no judgments. Don't laugh. But my trick is color coding. Now, back to the comment earlier about the ADHD brain. Some of this is my ADHD success strategy, because I'm very visual. I think in pictures. And so what I find is this is very helpful to help me maintain that balance. Now, I'm not talking just meetings. Some of these are simply reminders. Now, I tried to blur. I'm looking at it like, did I blur out everything I wanted to? Like you can see over there, November 21st, this webinar is on the 21st, and I have it from 2:40 to 4 o'clock because I have to log in 20 minutes early. That's when this actually starts for me. But you'll notice I have a larger block of time around it to protect that time on my calendar. I have shared calendars. The home calendar over here is actually the home account. My husband and I have a shared Gmail for all of our home administration. And we've agreed that we're going to put things on that calendar so each of us know if there are demands on our time that the other person has to think about. So, for example, but what can be challenging about something like this is that it can feel overwhelming. There can be too much going on with all the overlays. The best part about it is, and this isn't a dynamic view, although maybe I should have done that, but I can click on any one of these over here on the left, and that's going to drop off the calendar or pop onto the calendar. I even go so far as to put what I'm making for dinner on the calendar. And inside of that, when you open it up, I might even have the ingredients list. So I remember if I'm making this, put these 5 things on the shopping list. You'd be surprised at how detailed it is. It's a habit I've developed, but it helps me to remember birthdays. It helps me to remember that I need to focus on something, that I've made a commitment to something. You'll notice right there on the 20th, in the middle of the day, there's a little box that's black, and it says Calendly block. So if anybody uses a tool like Calendly, like I do, where somebody can go to my page and just drop an appointment on my website, my calendar, they don't need to call me to find out when I'm available. They can just look in Calendly, see I'm available, and schedule something. But by creating those little blocks like this and setting up my Calendly like that, nobody can find that time on Calendly. So little things like that, these are things that I do to protect my calendar. It also helps me over here on the right in the middle, honor my flexibility, right? It honors the fact that I might need to pivot. This is an important leadership value that we want to certainly model for others. Building space in the day, you see that just below that one? This is important because it creates those sprints, those permission to be offline, those times when I'm unavailable. Now, I am a solopreneur now, but back in the day when I was in practice, what I would do is I would put these blocks of time so people would know they don't interrupt me. If it's important, yes, you're always welcome to knock on my door and come in. Otherwise, you know that this is some uninterrupted time that I'm going to try to work. And I need to focus, especially as a leader and an entrepreneur. There are a lot of things coming at you. Sometimes they're work, sometimes they're personal. And you're going to need to have signals when it's time to pop over and do something else. Otherwise, it's okay to protect your time. So the other thing I want to share is this personal well-being wheel. And the reason I designed this, I talk about this in my webinars about personal self-care, managing stress, and that kind of thing. The reason I put this together is I wanted to show that there are different dimensions of our self-care and seeing this holistically, that this isn't just looking at one For example, physical health. When we think of self-care, a lot of things people think about is just our body and our body's functions, or they think about mental wellness. But our body's function requires rest and recovery. Our mental wellness requires that sense of purpose and that social connection. And so these are interconnected elements, 7 different domains to think about to help us understand the impact of that energy, the balance of that energy, and the different parts of our life that we need to create, be intentional about and create those firm boundaries around so that we can make sure that we're experiencing all of the things that will create that sense of fulfillment. So I'll just end it with this, and then I'll have a couple minutes to kind of go back to Q&A and to share some of the comments. Please drop your strategies in the chat because I think it's lovely to see what other people are thinking about. I'm going to go back real quick. What was the other one? Oh, yeah. Also, I'll just mention these other three real quick. So, reevaluating commitments regularly. We have habits, and every time we reinforce a habit, sometimes we get a little bit of a dopamine hit. So it feels good. So, we want to double check that what we're doing is aligned with what our priorities are. If you have standing meetings, assess, do I really need that standing meeting, right? Self-care, rest, exercise, and nutrition are requirements to optimize our performance. They're not optional, right? And then I said here earlier, I talked about non-negotiables. And then take the long view. I want to make sure, thank you for Jana for coming back to this. So take the long view. You have to look, I would say, 18 months to 2 years out to always keep present what you want to achieve in your career, because it's not going to happen for you. It's going to happen by you. And so what you want to make sure you're doing is, what are the things that I need to develop? What are some skills that I want to improve on or establish? What are the steps I need to take to achieve that thing, whether it's a promotion, whether it's a completely different role, whether it's getting to become a black belt, like what is that thing? And then make sure you plan for that progress. And that requires you to think about holistically your life so that you're not constantly doing that chasing, right? Chasing the balance. Like if I just work really hard now, I'll get it later. If you're doing that, later is always later. Later is never now. Wow, I think the way I said that made sense. So back to my recap, right? This isn't a question of control. This is that self-awareness. It's that comment. Let me go back. Did you? I think you might have taken it out, Jasmine. So if I remember it correctly, this is the comment about doing a little less of the thing that you don't like and doing a little bit more of the thing that you do like. That's not how it was said, but that's the
balance is decreasing anything excessive and increasing anything that's deficient.
Yes. And excessive and deficient in the context of I'm doing too much of it, I'm not doing enough of it to give me that sense of fulfillment and that sense of centered energy. Leaders model permission. If you protect your balance, the team learns that it's okay to do so. Do as I say, not as I do. That never worked. I don't know where that came as a saying. Not a good saying. When we lead from the point of integration, right? This means that our leadership doesn't live in a vacuum, in a separate lens. Our leadership acknowledges all of these different dimensions, and it validates them, and it honors them, and it supports them in ourselves and in others. Our teams will mirror how we show up. And then the last one, managing boundaries, influences perceptions, right? When I set a boundary, it's respect for myself and respect for others. Clears expectations, and so it clears perceptions. It eliminates unintended perceptions and outcomes. Now, usually I create tools like a worksheet or something like that, but this time I thought I'd just create a list of some of the different tools that can help us with some of this balance. I use a lot of these. There's not a lot of time to go into them. You're welcome to reach out to me if there's a tool that you'd like to suggest. Certainly, I'd like to learn from you. But if you also have questions about any of these, I have a strategy or a tool or an app or a hack, I should say, in every one of these categories, which is what got me to think about sharing all of these. Because I do feel like over the years, I've come to this place where I do feel that sense of balance and grounding, because I've made it a priority to recognize that being out of balance doesn't feel good. And I'm at my best in every domain if I feel balanced holistically, if that makes sense. Now, before I wrap up with the final thoughts and questions, I just want to do a little self-promotion. And I want to remind everybody that if you want to continue this journey, this series has always been the fourth Friday of the month. However, I think that's not the date in December because of the holidays. And I don't remember if it's the 4th in November. So here's the dates, right? November 21, Networking for Leaders. And what we're talking about is networking is relationship building, not collecting contacts, but cultivating curiosity and other stories and perspectives and journeys as a way to deepen our relationships that help us grow and expand our contact list, right? You can scan this QR code to register now. Jasmine might drop the link in the Q&A. And there's also on my website, you can get registration links as well as videos, handouts, and resources for all the other webinars in this series. And with that, I will say, let me go to the Q&A and see. Okay, people are dropping things in, and so it's starting to change. What's the name of the calendar? So the one that I use is called Mailbird. I can't say your name. I don't want to say it wrong. I won't say your name wrong, but you asked me about that. Reach out to me. I'm happy to share with you what I use. Mailbird, what it does is it pulls in every email that I have, my Gmail, my personal Gmail, my home Gmail. I have a lot of them. I won't explain why, but it helps me see all of my email in one place. What else? It's funny, every time I scroll, it moves again because new things are coming in. But thank you all for being engaged. Oh my gosh, it's 4 o'clock. Jasmine, I'm going to shut up and say goodbye.
No worries. Thank you so much, Janah.